Today, we are joined by the man with all the legal hot takes that keep making headlines, attorney David Gelman, a man who's not afraid to call it like it is. He's weighed in on everything from the Menendez brothers to Sean Diddy Combs to Bryan Kohberger and Karen Reed. And while celebrities might be reshaping public opinion, Gelman's here to remind us where the law actually draws its line. He's here with us on the Killer Psychologist alongside my colleague, Craig Wetter, to discuss the celebrity justice effect. Now, let's talk about a case that refuses to die. This is a case from 1989 that hasn't faded out of the spotlight. Decades later, the Menendez brothers' story is still grabbing headlines and stirring controversy across mainstream media and pop culture. Some call them monsters. Others call them victims. And somewhere between abuse allegations and a double-barrel shotgun lies one of the most debated cases in modern legal history. Kim Kardashian said the Menendez brothers are kind, intelligent, and honest men who've transformed in prison. Do you buy that? Or are we just getting bamboozled by the Kardashian PR machine? What do you think, David?
Kim Kardashian, she really has, 100% accuracy in reading people. So, I'm really not going to take her opinion when it comes to how people are acting. Obviously, she was married to Kanye, so we don't have to, really look too far for that one. Look, this is a sensationalized case, as you just pointed out. I really don't understand why it's so sensationalized. The only reason it is I call it the Netflix effect. Once it gets on Netflix, which is pretty much the big screen nowadays, which it's taken over how everybody watches movies and TV. If it gets on Netflix, game over. You're going to be a celebrity overnight, whether you wanted to or not. And, you're going to have this more and more when it comes to different crime dramas. And because I think it's just human nature. Now, in this particular one, I think Netflix definitely is trying to make the Menendez brothers out to be, something they're not. That's just how I'm looking at it. People could disagree with me. They're going to be wrong, but that's fine. They can still disagree with me. The facts of the case are the facts of the case, and nothing can change that. The Menendez brothers, they're saying that they were physically and sexually abused by their parents. All right, look, let's just believe that. All right. If that's true, no problem. However, they meticulously planned the brutal murder of their mother and their father. And it wasn't just, a murder, shoot them, boom, done. No, this was a shotgun to the head of both of them while they were not looking. So it was, assassin style. And then the mom was begging for her life, and they shot her multiple times thereafter. So and not to mention, the abuse wasn't happening at that particular time. If they were being abused at the particular time of the murder, they could have a really good defense, but they weren't. That is what is just, it drives me crazy that people just are not realizing this. Oh, they were abused. So if everybody is abused, that means they can kill whoever is doing the abuse. I mean, that's really what everybody is trying to say, or the people who are defending the Menendez brothers are saying. You can't do that. We're not that type of society. That's why there are laws here. But everything has gone against the Menendez brothers. Every appeal they have had has lost. They had 2 trials. One was a mistrial. The second, which is very hard to do after a mistrial, the second trial was a guilty verdict. Now, usually when you have a mistrial, you don't get the second bite of the apple It's not really good for the prosecution. However, in this particular case, obviously there was plenty of evidence, and the jury of their peers believed it, that they committed the crime, and that, all that sexual abuse, that had nothing to do with it. But the Menendez brothers, they appealed it. They appealed it to the Superior Court, the Supreme Court of California. They appealed it to the appeals court, the federal appeals court. They appealed it to the district court. They appealed it multiple times, and to the circuit courts in California. Every time they've gotten denied. So what has changed since then and now? One thing: Netflix. And everybody is sensationalizing this. That's it. So nothing else has changed. Now, have they changed in jail? Maybe they've grown a little mature. I don't know. They were young guys when this started, 19, 20, 21, something like that. But they planned this. They try to get alibis. They try to get friends to be brought in to tell different stories. So, I understand they're sorry. Of course they're sorry. They're facing the rest of their life in prison. If they're not going to say they're sorry, then they really have something wrong with them. But I'm just not buying it.
Yeah, this whole self-defense argument that they were making, or at least the defense was making, right? And we can talk about imperfect self-defense and such, but that defense strategy was a long shot, right? And I think in the second trial, correct me if I'm wrong, but the judge limited the amount of evidence that could come in regarding the sexual abuse. I think that was what changed in the second trial.
That factor, yep.
Yeah, that factor. And so once that was removed, they got that guilty verdict. But that's interesting that, even jurors still, that mistrial was because that first jury couldn't come to a unanimous verdict. And it was because of that sexual abuse history that they testified to it, and they brought in, some family members and such. And regardless, it's, that argument or that defense, self-defense, just doesn't fly in this fact pattern. And it baffles me as well, in terms of how can people get to that leap of logic where it's like their lives were in danger of imminent great bodily injury or death. That's the only time you have a defense to use lethal force in California and in most jurisdictions, is if your life is in imminent threat of serious bodily injury or death. How do they establish that when they're sitting in there watching TV in their living room, right? I mean, that's where they were killed. They were killed on the couch.
Yeah, but you can't. And remember, this wasn't something that they just thought of on a whim. Oh, let's go kill mom and dad today. This was planned.
They went out and bought the shotgun at Big Five Sporting Goods, a month before or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Was it Big Five?
Yes, it was Big Five, and I think it was down in San Diego or something. They drove to a different city to buy it. They didn't buy it in Los Angeles County or Beverly Hills where they were living at the time. I think they went down to San Diego to buy it. They went out of town.
Yeah, they tried to cover all their stats. I mean, look, they thought they got away with the perfect murder, and they did for a period of time. But, I guess there's really no such thing as a perfect murder, because eventually you're going to probably get caught.
Yeah. Well, in Beverly Hills PD back then, so this is a funny take, this is my days as a police officer, but Beverly Hills PD, they don't get a lot of murder cases, and Beverly Hills generally is, as we all know, it's pretty upscale. So there was some criticisms early on about, that initial investigation, because they kind of were like the Keystone Cops initially, not, oh my God, we got a double murder here in Beverly Hills. Let's just say their detectives didn't have a lot of experience doing.
Were they trying to figure out who was fighting over whose lawn looked better? Is that there were several strategic mistakes made in terms of how you deal with a quote witness and or possible person of interest, which again, we always look to the family members and or the people closest to the victim, in any homicide investigation. Or if it's a murder, the first thing that as an investigator I would look at is the spouse, the boyfriend, girlfriend, or the parent, or the children, etc. Because the probability is that it's likely to be somebody that do the victims, right? They were close to the victims, so they weren't treating them as they weren't looking at them that way initially in the investigation. And I think there were some missteps there.
They weren't looking that hard. I don't think those cops were looking that in the beginning.
I mean, remember the whole story about they thought they were trying to paint the story that the mafia was involved. There was some type of, it was a hit. It was a calculated hit or something. They were creating a narrative around that. And, that's silly.
You don't go out and buy Rolexes and cars and stuff like that. If you keep a low profile, I mean, normal, if you're not normal if you kill somebody, but let's just say if you had a half a brain, you would think, all right, we're going to keep low. Like it's remember the Goodfellas where they robbed that truck and then they come in and bought mink coats and different cars and De Niro's like, you guys are idiots. Put this all away. Put it all away.
Like, where'd all that money come from all of a sudden?
Yeah. I love that movie. Yeah, suddenly everyone's wearing furs at the Christmas party. So you get on Netflix and, this is also turned very political, right? For the district attorney and those wanting to get into office. So they use this as this card to play. How'd that work out?
The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office has changed since they got Gascon out. So
I think this was like the nail in the coffin for Gascon because he was all in favor of releasing these guys, and I think LA just said, "You've got to be kidding me, right? Like you're going to just release murderers who are convicted." So I think that was a nail in the coffin, and then this new one who's in now, I forget his name, the DA, but he's against it, and he I got to tell you. He had a press conference like 3 weeks ago, and he put out a closing argument. When I thought it was awesome. I'm telling everybody, if you want to see what a closing argument should look like, watch this guy. He just destroyed it, and I don't think it's going to go very well for the Menendez brothers getting out. I don't think a judge is going to release them. And I certainly don't think the parole board will be too kind to them. But hey, I could be wrong, I guess. I don't know.
Well, it is California, as you know. So
that's what they have going for them. And Kim Kardashian.
Why? Well, right. Because if Kim says, these guys are legit. They're not killers.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, she's a psychologist, right? She's a forensic psychologist, and she's trained in understanding and how to tease out whether someone is a psychopath or not, right?
I think so, and also isn't she an attorney? Right? Hasn't she?
I think she also has a
juris something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
she's an expert.
I'd hire her.
Well, she has her own show. So, what does it take to get my own Netflix special? So, Bryan Kohberger, he's up next for his own Hulu or Netflix special.
Oh.
What message is this sending out there to people?
To potential jurors, right?
Well, number one, it's sending a really dangerous message because it's sensationalizing killers. You're going to have Luis Mangione. I guarantee you will have him. He'll have one soon. And this is just the world we live in now. It's kind of weird, where they're sensationalizing them. They're almost like making them celebrities, and it's going to make society look and like normalize us, and it shouldn't be. And then look, there's going to be a lot of sick people out there who are going to say, oh well, if I commit something like this, I'll be able to go get my own Netflix special, and it's a shame, but that's kind of the world we're living in now. But Greg, you're right. For jury selection, this is going to really make everything a lot more difficult to pick a jury because look, Netflix, like I said, everybody watches Netflix. So how are you going to have a juror not know anything and not be able to and not be biased against the defendant? You can't.
Yeah, and is a very good point. You can't because again, Netflix, the saturation is significant in terms of the number of people that have access to that, to that media platform. So, I would be if I was, the prosecutor in the Kohberger case, I'd be very concerned about that, about trying to get an unbiased jury because, and again, we can get political, I guess. I don't know. But let's just face it. Some of these, these shows, they are framed in ways, they're crafting narratives, and those narratives, might be favoring one side over the other, right? Like they could be, trying to favor a defendant, a criminal defendant. So they're going to craft a show, or they're going to craft an episode or whatever, a documentary, that only kind of frames things in exculpatory, fashion. In other words, they're not going to look at everything in totality. So that I worry about that kind of stuff, right?
Look, when you got shows, they may, spread the truth a little bit, but in the end of the day, they're trying to make money. Right? That's what they're doing, and everybody knows it. So of course, they're going to make somebody look a little better than they should, i.e. the Menendez brothers. It'll be very interesting to see, how the Kohberger, how that's going to turn out. Look, Karen Reed, same thing. Right now, she's they have movies about her on like Lifetime or something like that. They're really skewing the story and the narrative. And again, it's all for money. We all get that. But when you have a juror that's going to see this, they're human. All right, they're not robots. So they're going to remember this, and they're going to it could potentially dictate how they would view a case.
And let's talk about this juror that was on the Karen Reed trial. So that was a mistrial, and now this person's joined the defense team. Like, I heard you make a comment before, David, that you'd never even heard of, a juror switching sides and joining the defense. Like, what are the legal and ethical implications of that?
That's the first thing I thought of. Like, ethically, can you do this? And I'm thinking about it, and I asked a couple colleagues what their opinions would be. And, we all came to the same conclusion that, number one, nobody has ever heard anything like this happening. Never. But the second thing, I don't think there's any ethical violations. There are ethical issues here. Like, so I don't, and I don't think anything has been raised yet in Massachusetts from the state. So I'm thinking they're going to be, okay to do it. And when I see that, I think to myself, okay, so if a juror is saying that Karen Reed is innocent and that they have this, it's such ingrained in their head that they think it's their duty that they have to go defend Karen Reed, what does that say about the other jurors or the potential new jury pool that will happen, that will come about in the new trial? That is a terrible look for the prosecutor. And that's, it's a bad omen. I mean, think about it. Oh, hey, I'm Joe Schmo. Yes. You may remember me. I was a jury on the previous trial, and now I'm representing Karen Reed. That's not going to be a good look when they have to introduce themselves to the jury.
I know. As soon as I heard that, it just changes my perception of the whole trial, guilt or innocence, just that one thing. Right. And this just so how powerful the media can be with these narratives and how it does shape people's opinions, their perceptions, and even the final outcome of these trials.
Mm-hmm. And also, let's just remember, so it's very common to, if you have a mistrial on your first trial and the state, says, all right, we're going to go forward again, that it's, the likelihood of conviction the second time around is not very high. If you look at cases just in general, it's the likelihood of conviction is way lower than a first time. So that's why you don't have a ton of second trials unless it's absolutely necessary or the state feels they have a great case. Menendez brothers, that's more of a a one-off, if you will. But overall, you don't have good luck the second time. So this Karen Reed trial, that is really going to be very interesting. Like, I don't think the facts of the case are great to begin with. Personally, I think there's a ton of reasonable doubt, and that's all you need as a defense attorney. Now you have a mistrial, which will be brought into evidence that that will be known. So I think that's going to definitely raise a lot more issues for a jury, and it's going to make the prosecution even more difficult second time around.
So if Karen Reed didn't kill her husband, then who did?
I don't know. That's a really good question.
I don't know either. I mean, that's the question, right?
So let's take a step back here. I'm not saying that she didn't kill the husband. All right. I'm not saying that, or boyfriend, whatever they were. But I'm just saying that the facts of the case, from what I know, from what I've read, and I've read quite a bit of it, there is a lot of reasonable doubt. That's what I say. I'm not saying she did or didn't do it, because she certainly could have. But I'm just saying, as a defense attorney, I'm putting my defense attorney hat on here. I am pounding reasonable doubt, and reasonable doubt look, if you have a scintilla of doubt that so-and-so did this, that Karen Reed did this, you cannot vote to have Karen Reed be guilty. End of story. If there's some type of doubt, and so the defense is going to be throwing doubt at them left and right, going to be questioning each and every witness that the prosecution brings, and they're going to make it look, or they're going to show that whoever was investigating the case, and a couple people, at least one officer was fired already because of how he investigated the case. That's reasonable doubt right there. So you bring a bunch of other evidence in there, you're going to be just pounding the table each and every time about reasonable doubt. And then your closing argument is going to just center around reasonable doubt. I mean, I'm a broken record, but that's exactly what you have to be.
And that's the beauty of being a defense lawyer, or criminal defense lawyer, as opposed to the prosecutor, right? Because, hey, that's all you have to do.
It really is. It's a hell of a lot harder being a prosecutor.
I mean, you've been a prosecutor, right? So you've. So that's one thing I haven't done. I haven't been a prosecutor, but I have defended people in criminal cases. And so I always say, I have a colleague that he was a former police officer and is now a criminal defense lawyer. And he's like, this is the ticket. It's so much easier, because we don't have to prove anything, right? It's on the prosecution side to prove every element. It really is.
And the prosecutor they have a high burden to prove, and it's their case. Hell, we could just sit back and say, all right, we'll call us when the trial's over.
Exactly.
Hypothetically, but
raise an objection here and there.
Yeah, but it's as a prosecutor, I love doing it. Don't get me wrong, I had a blast. I had a great time doing it, and I tried a lot of cases, and I won a fair amount too. But it is night and day compared to as a defense attorney.
All right, David, would you rather be prosecuting Bryan Kohberger, or would you rather be working with his defense team?
Ooh, good question.
That is a good question. All right, so that one, everything I'm reading so far, I'd probably go prosecution. Look, if I'm just winning or losing, if that's the case, I got to go prosecution. I like what the defense is doing. They're doing a great job, but I just, there's just too much evidence against this guy. And then they're saying that he's autistic, and they're trying to use that as a defense. Which is, it's just not going to fly.
Well, no, it's not. It's funny because Dana and I did a documentary with Fox Nation. What was it going on 2 years ago? Well, yeah, it was a while back. And I remember that almost came up during our discussion in terms of, because we were talking about psychological factors, and we had to be really careful what we said, obviously, because, we can't diagnose or anything. But, that was something that we were discussing that whole way before this even popped up, is I wonder if autism spectrum might be involved here. Of course, we can't diagnose because we'd have to actually see him and assess him. But yeah, but that's not going to work. Like you said, I mean, autism spectrum is not going to be, unless they're because you can't use NGRI in Idaho. So
no. He's going. I'm telling you, he's going to plead. He will plead. He's going to have to, because his attorneys know. When you had the sheath, the big knife they found, and you found his DNA. Game over. I mean, you can't. And then you had the other aspects where his phone was turned off and then turned on in the same areas.
That's not a good look.
Well, they've got circumstantial and they have some direct evidence as well. I mean, they've got, so they do have good facts basically and good evidence.
They do. And then the bushy eyebrows and all that kind of stuff. I mean, again, nobody saw the guy. I get that, but and then his Amazon search and buying history will also be coming in from what it looks like. And he was searching for this sheath and whatever it was.
Well, he bought a K-bar. Yeah, I think he bought. I think they do have they have that Amazon purchase history, and I think he purchased a K-bar knife on Amazon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I believe he did. So I mean, look, there's just so much evidence now. A reasonable doubt. We'll go back to it. That's the defense. That's what they're going to say all along. Defense. Yep, reasonable doubt. Because look, there's some missteps maybe in the whole investigation. But I got to tell you, if I'm his defense attorneys, I'm going to look at him and I'm like, look, dude, you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison, or you're going to get the death penalty potentially. You really should think about let's see if we can avoid you dying or getting shot to death in Idaho, which is their death penalty. So I think that's what they're going to do, because it's not going to be good. And also, look, it's Idaho, all right. How many people, Idaho is not a huge, a populated state. So you're going to have to live under a rock unless you don't know anything about this case.
And your jury pool in Idaho tends to, on average, be a lot more conservative in terms of, just looking at the political leanings, unless you're in like the Boise area. But that's another thing that they're going to have to look at, which is, just the, your jury pool. What type of juror are you going to get? This is a, Second Amendment, heavy state where they believe in the rule of law and they don't put up with nonsense there,
Oh yeah. Look, I've been to Idaho. It's a beautiful state. I love it.
Very nice. Very nice.
The people were very, very nice, but yeah, they are very Second Amendment, pro-gun, which, I think is very cool. And I think that it's going to be very pro-prosecution, which defense knows. They're not stupid. I think they've done a great job in trying to keep evidence out. There's only so much you're going to be able to do, but I really think they've done a fantastic job so far. But look, when you're given oranges, there's only so many things you can do with it.
So I heard something about a Brady violation in this case.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course, there's going to be, Brady claims put up. So do you want to talk about Brady?
You don't have to get all the evidence all the time. Don't worry about that. That could be an issue.
Of course. I mean, if they could discredit any of the officers and any of the investigators, under the Brady, doctrine, then sure, they're going to be able to potentially get some of this evidence suppressed. But that's a common. I mean, I'm going to say it's common, but do we want to explain what a Brady violation is? I mean, the audience may not know what that is. But
it's a Supreme Court case. So pretty much what it means is, look, when you are a defense, when you are the defendant, you are entitled to all of the evidence in your matter. All the evidence that was obtained by the state, you are entitled to it. Now, if evidence is being withheld, and it's being withheld illegally, meaning they have it and they just don't want to tell you they have it, that is what they call a Brady violation. And if you find out about it and they're trying to use it, that evidence will be excluded from trial. And also, let's just put this in there as well. The prosecutor will definitely get in trouble, sanctioned, disbarred, whoever knows, what'll ever happen. It is. You're right, Greg. It is somewhat common to bring that issue up. However, it is very rare, not saying it's impossible, but it's rare that a prosecutor will commit a Brady violation, because if they do, they're going to get fired. Number one, their reputation is down the drain, and they could potentially get disbarred. So, prosecutors, they don't make a ton of money to begin with. They're not going to risk their career on, withholding evidence. It's very rare. Actually, there was a prosecutor here in New Jersey. It happened to about a year and a half ago. But nobody liked her. So, oh well.
Get her out of here. Yeah. I mean, and I don't know if this in the specific Brady violation or if it has to do with officer, if the prosecution is withholding any evidence of, say, an officer's misconduct, but those are the facts of the actual Brady case, where there was an officer who had a disciplinary history and had was alleged to have falsified evidence or falsified information in an official investigation, and if that officer is on the Brady list, and so DA's offices now, I believe across the United States, have to keep a list of peace officers who have had any kind of integrity violations that could affect their credibility as witnesses in a criminal case, and the prosecution has to disclose that. So, Dana, is that what's going on here, or are they saying that prosecution is not turning over potential exculpatory evidence? I mean, it could be either, right? So, I mean, look, like you said, David, it's like, that's the defense attorney's job. I mean, you're trying to get, if I could find anything on any, the DA doesn't turn over any even sliver of evidence that could be exculpatory, I'm going to raise that as an issue, obviously, right?
But honestly, do we think there's anything that can save Kohberger at this point or salvage his soul? I mean, obviously I have my own opinion on that. So I'm going to go with David on that one. I'm going to be on the prosecution.
I would want to prosecute him too. Yeah. If you take it to trial, I mean, if I was to bet on it, I think the probabilities are he would likely, and I don't want to say with certainty, but he doesn't have the odds in his favor in my estimation. So yeah, I definitely would want to be the prosecutor as well in that case. And they're going death penalty, right? They're definitely going death penalty there, and they'll, and you'll get it if you get a conviction, right? As long as
that's going to be a slam dunk if they get the conviction, and that I think that's their biggest negotiating piece right now. Hey, we'll take death penalty off the table, but you better plead guilty to you're spending life. So, I don't know.
Life in prison. Yeah. The DA's hardcore, they might say, nope, we're taking it to trial, because it's a huge media coverage and all that kind of stuff. So again, the DA has, may have motives too, to want to nope, we're taking it. We're not reducing this. We're not going to reduce to life in prison, and this will be interesting to see what happens, because when's this trial going to be going? This has been going on almost 3.5 years now. I mean, is
it that long?
Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, they're talking, and again, this is another strategy, right? If I'm the defense, drag it out as long as possible. Witnesses forget things, it's like, that's another strategy, right? Delay.
Yeah, that's true. I think it starts in July.
Oh, so they finally have a trial date set.
Yeah,
so,
it starts in July.
Because I think when we were doing that special, remember, Dana, they were saying, oh, they're thinking the trial is going to start next year. And we filmed that in 2023. So that was, so that was in 2023. So I think this happened, in 2022?
Meanwhile, Netflix producers are cooking up, their own Kohberger episode, right? Okay, David, we ask you what side you're on for Kohberger. Let's see, are you team Blake Lively or Justin Caldioni? It's not a criminal case, but it feels criminal to just even be taking all their content in. It's really over the top. Will this ever end?
I have to be on either side because I hate both of them, honestly. I mean,
no, you don't have to be on any side.
No.
But a $400 million legal brawl seems kind of pricey.
It's all bullshit. I mean, come on. Look, I read all the text messages, which frankly, I can't get that amount of time back in my life, which that's the whole.
Oh my God. I'm glad you read them all, because I can't do it.
Oh, it was insane. Like, Justin, he seems like a whiny little bitch. I'm just going to call a spade here. Blake, she didn't seem like a peach herself. And then Ryan Reynolds, I really like him in his movies. So I think this is all going to settle in the end. In fact, I know it will settle in the end because you have these, Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, buku dollars. Okay. You have Baldoni, on the other hand, a very big amount of money as well. You also have publicists that are involved. You have media agencies that are involved. You have Taylor Swift, who may be involved, meaning she would have to be subpoenaed and give a deposition potentially. Nobody wants these things because once that happens, then shit really is going to hit the fan, and other questions can come out and other answers can come out that could be embarrassing to all parties involved. So I don't think that this is going to go much further. And that would be my guess. They're going to have a settlement. I don't know who would come out on top. Frankly, I don't think anybody's coming out on top because people are looking at it and be like, you have these two Hollywood stars bitching about, money and, oh, he was mean to me and she was mean to me. And, get the hell out of here. I look, I'd love to be the attorneys on that because make a ton of money.
Big bucks.
Big bucks. Build the hell out of this. But
24/7, you're billing 24/7 because the dialogue just never ends.
You really are. And look, I have some pretty high profile clients and some of them they're awesome. Look, I've never had any problems with them, but you have to know how to handle them. And now I've never had anybody as high profile as Blake Lively or Baldoni or Ryan Reynolds. Don't get me wrong. But so I can only imagine the gloves they're going to have to wear, the attorneys' gloves are going to have to wear for them. But look, they are smart enough to realize that when you start doing depositions, that's when some stuff is going to come out that you do not want to come out. And they're telling the attorneys that. So I have a feeling that in the end, there will be a settlement done. And, obviously part of the it'll be non-disclosed. So we'll never know it, obviously. But I'm sure part of it will be that, you can't disparage each other anymore. Obviously, you're never going to work together again. And you kind of just go your separate ways. That's what I would think is going to happen.
Wow. Yeah, how did that work out for Amber Heard when she went to trial and you're on the stand and the camera's rolling and you've been psychologically evaluated and the test scores are in and someone's going to be testifying on that or whether this has caused you trauma or PTSD or what is the actual diagnosis now. And you know what? That turned out not to be a really good look. And I would say, be careful when you end up being psychologically evaluated, you might not like the outcome of that because there's some severe personality pathology in cases where you're bickering back and forth forever. And I know because I do a lot of cases where people bicker back and forth forever, like child custody evaluations and family law and all kinds of cases, right, where they're fighting forever and they can't stop. And I do their psychological testing, and it can reveal a lot about a person that if you take a look at that, you may not want that to go to trial for the public to consume and give you feedback on. And I think it probably went differently in Amber Heard's mind.
Well, and you raise a good point there, Dana, because I think that's a cautionary tale for celebrities where, all right, look, you can sue anybody you want, but it doesn't look good. Juries don't want to see celebrities in a court complaining over money. And that, I mean, you both probably know this better than anybody, but from all your work, where you see juries are not, you're dealing with, a jury of your peers. So not everybody lives in a $50 million mansion. You got everybody's there. You're a lot of working class people. So when they see people on the stand and they're in their designer suits or dresses and, with their designer bags, and they're saying, oh, well, they were mean to me when I was making $30 million on a set and whatnot. It doesn't look good.
Doesn't resonate.
Juries don't like that.
You know what else the jury doesn't like? To hear about someone shitting in someone's bed.
Yeah, nobody would like that.
I mean, that was the end for me.
That could get much worse than that. But that's the kind of stuff that nobody wants to hear. Juries particularly don't want to hear that. But that is a cautionary tale, and it is important, I think, for just generally anybody to know that when you put your psychological, if you make a claim that involves psychological injuries, right, any kind of injury to your psyche, then expect your psyche to be evaluated vigorously. And unfavorable things might emerge in, our evaluation, our assessment, which can include, as Dana said, personality pathology. And, personality pathology is not mental illness, by the way. It is trait and character based. So, and some of those results, may not look good, borderline personality, narcissistic, antisocial, those sorts of things.
All right, let's talk about Team Diddy. Is anyone on Diddy's side? Is there any Team Diddy? Do you want to be on the prosecution side for Sean Diddy Combs, right? Or you want to be working the defense? But the defense is making some bank because this case is working around the clock, okay?
Mm-hmm. It's funny you say that. So I was watching Harvey Levin on TMZ did a mock trial. It was on TV a couple days ago. I don't know if anybody saw it. And, when you have like these pretty big high profile cases, as a defense attorney and as a prosecutor, you're going to try to have mock trials. They cost a couple dollars to do, but if the client has money, I always advise, hey, look, this is something you might want to do, especially if you have a potential plea versus a trial. It's good to do this. And in the mock trial that TMZ did, it really wasn't as cut and dry as everybody says, because number one, look, I think it's going to be very difficult to get an unbiased jury because everybody knows Diddy. So that's number one. But number two, there's going to be the topic of race. I think and I thought of it originally, but I didn't really put a ton of stock into it. And in the TMZ mock jury, the jurors, they, were at that pretty hard. So they think that this has there could be some racial epithets around this. So I think that could be something in Diddy's favor. The other thing that the jury was talking about, and I've said this from the beginning, but, there's so many things with Diddy that it's hard to keep up, where a lot of these crimes, these federal crimes that he's being charged with, you have to have some type of profit, meaning, there's all these sex parties allegations and he made people engage in these sexual activities, but there had to have been some type of profit. And there was, from all the testimony and from everything that I've seen, there is no profit. So the jury saw that, and that was a big question. So there was not a unanimous jury in that TMZ show that they did. And, that could be a precursor to his federal trial. I'm not saying, they did it all right. And I'm not saying that, and obviously TV trials and real trials are two different things, but that's something that I would be keeping my eye on. So right now, look, I think the government has the upper hand. That's 100%. In any federal case, government has the upper hand. I mean, it's a very unfair process when the federal system.
They've got the resources. Yeah, they've got a lot more resources.
They got, the feds don't take cases unless they really think it's going to be a winner. All right, it's not state, it's the feds. So they really have, like you said, a lot of resources, but they don't take loser cases. They take winning cases. It's just what they do. And I'm not saying that they don't have a winning case, but I think Diddy may, have a couple tricks up his sleeve in the end. I don't know. And at the same time, look, I know that Diddy is saying, I'm taking this to trial. I want to go. I'm still not going to be surprised one way or another if it does go to trial or if it ends in a plea.
And is it my understanding they haven't named any of the co-conspirators yet?
That's accurate. Yeah, they haven't. And that's something they have, you have to actually have. You need to know who is being charged, or, well, they are not, the co-conspirators aren't charged, but you need to know the other individuals that are associated with your case. It's a due process claim. So while for them not to know it, especially this late in the ball game, I think that's very problematic.
Well, I want to know.
Yeah, you and me both.
I think P. Diddy knows.
He better know. He better know.
But P. Diddy's not talking. He's not going to be talking.
No,
at this point.
Oh, it'll be interesting to see the whatever defense strategy, they're trying to pull for him, any psychological angle, right? For sympathy. I think they're still trying to get him out on bail, and that's being declined.
He won't get out. There's no way. No, I think they've tried like at least 3 times, if not more. And each time they've been denied. There's no change in circumstances. And apparently he hasn't been a model citizen either in the prison. So I don't think a judge is going to be that sympathetic towards him.
Oh my God. Well, I think we covered all the cases today. We'll have to have you come back. What case do you want to come back on and discuss? There's so many fascinating cases out there.
Whichever one. You let me know. I'll be here.
Okay, I will. Well, thank you so much. Let our audience know where they can connect and find you, follow you on Instagram, and whatever others your favorite social media app is.
So you can go to our website at gelmanlawfirm.com. And also, I know we have an Instagram thing, but I really don't know it. But we also have a Twitter, or the X. It's David Gelman ESQ.
You're the same on Instagram because I just followed you.
I am?
Instagram.
Okay. Thank you, Dana.
Somebody's hooking you up, and I just went on and watched your videos. So you've been on a lot of media outlets, and they're posting everything there. So I'll collab with you there. And I know you're active on Twitter, which I think it's great. So people can connect with you, and we can ask you what side you're on, ask you any questions, interact with you.
Go for it.
So I so much appreciate your time today and your insight. It was really fun to have you, David. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I look forward to coming back, and this was a lot of fun.
All right, awesome. Have a great day.
You too, guys.
Thanks for listening. For episode details and merch, check out killerpsychologistpodcast.com. And for forensic services, you can book online at psychologydr.com. That's psychologydoctor.com.